Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with a question about the shadows flickering in a medieval home, those strange beliefs that made your ancestors hang iron over the door or whisper to the fire. Have you ever wondered what it's like to live where every creak might be a spirit, every herb a spell? Join us to explore this dramatic and surprising story. Now, picture yourself in a thatched cottage, the air thick with wood smoke, your fingers brushing rough wool as you settle by the hearth. The world outside is alive with whispers of witches, fairies, and things that don't quite belong. You might not survive this, or at least your modern skepticism might not. So before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really vibe with what I'm doing here. Oh, and drop a comment. With your city and the local time, let's see who's listening in the witching hour. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're crouched by the hearth, the heart of this medieval home where flames dance like they've got secrets to spill. The fire's glow paints your face warm against the chill, seeping through the wattle and daub walls. It's not just heat. This hearth is alive with meaning. Every medieval family knew it was sacred, a place where the mundane met the mystical. You toss a log onto the coals and sparks fly like tiny spirits escaping. Your neighbor, a wiry woman with a kerchief, leans in and mutters, "Mind you don't anger the fire now. It's got a memory." You laugh, but her eyes don't. She's not joking. Superstitions cling to this place like damp to the walls. You learn fast that the hearth isn't just for cooking pottage or warming your toes. It's a barrier against the unseen. Historical records from the 14th century, like those from English manorial courts, show families fined for neglecting their hearths, proof it was central to survival and belief. If the fire went out, bad luck followed, maybe even a curse. You're told to never let the flames die at night, or you'll invite something darker than the cold. You nod, half smirking, but you check the woodpile anyway. Better safe than sorry, right? Then there's the quirky stuff, the kind of thing that makes you raise an eyebrow. Your neighbor swears by spitting into the fire to ward off bad spirits. It's a habit you notice everywhere, spittle sizzling on the logs like it's sealing a pact. She claims it's ancient, something her gran did, and her gran before that. You try it just once, and the fire pops loudly. Coincidence? You're not sure, but you don't do it again. It feels like tempting fate, and you're already on edge with all this talk of spirits. You shift on the stool, the straw beneath you rustling. The room smells of smoke and dried lavender hung in bundles to keep ill humors at bay. Every corner of this house hums with rituals you don't quite grasp. You notice a horseshoe nailed above the hearth, its curve facing up to trap good luck. You ask about it, and the neighbor chuckles, keeps the devil from dancing in. You roll your eyes, dancing devils really, but you don't touch it. The way she said it, like it's as normal as milking a cow, makes you wonder what else this house hides. Historians still debate whether these superstitions were purely practical or deeply spiritual. Did people nail up horseshoes because they believed in devils? Or was it just a way to feel in control in a world where crops failed and fevers killed? You ponder this as you poke the fire, the iron poker heavy in your hand. Iron, you're told, is key. It's not just for tools, it's a shield against the supernatural. You glance at the horseshoe again, its dull gleam catching the light. Maybe it's both a prayer and a precaution. You lean back, the fire's warmth sinking into your bones. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the shutters like it's testing the house's defenses. You're starting to see why these beliefs took root. This world is unpredictable, full of noises and shadows that don't explain themselves. You hear a story about a local man who ignored the hearth's rules. Let the fire die. Didn't spit, didn't hang iron. His cow stopped giving milk, and his wife fell ill. You scoff, but the neighbor's face is stone-cold serious. Happens, she says, shrugging. You don't argue. You're too busy watching the flames, wondering if they're watching you back. The night deepens, and you're drawn to the stories swirling around this hearth. You learn about fire scrying, where folks stared into the flames to see the future. You give it a try, squinting until your eyes water, but all you see is smoke and your own reflection. Still, the idea sticks with you people desperate for answers, finding them in the flicker of a log. You joke to yourself, maybe I'll see next week's weather. But the thought lingers. What did they see? Love death. Something worse, you're handed a cup of warm ale, spiced with herbs you can't name. It's bitter, but you sip anyway, feeling the household's rhythm. The hearth is more than a fire. It's the pulse of this life, tying you to the people who've sat here before. You notice a small carving in the mantel, a crude spiral. Your neighbor says it's for protection, like the horseshoe. You trace it with your finger, feeling the worn wood. It's strange, but it grounds you like you're part of something bigger. As the fire crackles, you realize you're not just warming your hands, you're stepping into a world where every action carries weight. You spit into the flames again, just in case. The neighbor grins and you laugh, but it's a nervous one. This house, this hearth, it's got you thinking maybe there's more to these old ways than you thought. You settle in, ready to learn what else this place has to whisper. You step toward the threshold of the medieval cottage, your boots scuffing the packed earth floor, and feel a shift in the air, like the house itself is holding its breath. The doorway, rough-hewn and low frames, a sliver of the world. Outside, a gray sky, a muddy path, the distant bleat of a goat. But you hesitate, your hand grazing the doorframe, because crossing this boundary isn't just a step. It's a ritual, a moment thick with meaning. You notice scratches in the wood, faint symbols etched where the beam meets the wall, and your neighbor's voice echoes in your head. Mind the threshold now. It's where the world meets the wild. This doorway is a line between safety and chaos, and medieval folk guarded it fiercely. You learn that thresholds were sacred, a fact backed by records from 13th century church decrees urging priests to bless homes at their entrances. A properly protected doorway kept out more than just the wind. It stopped spirits, curses, and whatever else lurked in the dark. You glance down and see a worn stone embedded in the floor, its surface polished by years of careful steps. Your neighbor, wiping her hands on her apron, nods at it. "Step over, never on," she says, "else you'll stir up trouble." You lift your foot high, feeling a bit silly, but you don't argue. The way the stone gleams like it's watching makes your stomach twist. Then, there's the odd stuff, the kind that makes you blink twice. You spot a bundle of dried nettles tied above the door, their prickly leaves swaying as you pass. Your neighbor swears they repel witches. "Stings 'em right back," she says with a grin, and you can't help but chuckle. Witches getting a taste of their own medicine. That's a new one. But you don't touch the nettles. You've heard stories of witches slipping through unprotected doors, and while you're not sold on the idea, you're not taking chances either. You lean closer, the sharp green scent of the nettles tickling your nose, and wonder how many hands tied this bundle before yours. The air feels heavier now, charged with the weight of these rituals. You notice a small iron nail driven into the doorframe, its head rusted but stubborn. Iron again, remember the horseshoe by the hearth. It's everywhere, a medieval obsession. You're told it's poison to anything supernatural, a belief so widespread it's mentioned in Anglo-Saxon texts like the Lacnunga, a collection of remedies and charms. You run your thumb over the nail, its cold bite grounding you. Keeps the fair folk out. Your neighbor whispers her voice low, like she's afraid they're listening. Fair folk. You smirk thinking of Tinkerbell, but her expression says, this is no fairy tale. You drop your hand, suddenly aware of the shadows pooling outside. Historians still debate whether these threshold rituals were about faith or fear. Were people warding off demons they truly believed in? Or were they just hedging their bets against a world they couldn't control? You ponder this as you trace the scratched symbols. Circles, crosses, lines that might mean nothing or everything. Some say they're prayers, others just marks to keep thieves guessing. You're not sure, but they make the doorway feel alive, like it's whispering back to the night. You step outside, careful to clear the stone, and the wind hits you sharp and smelling of rain. You're told to never linger in the doorway. It's neither in nor out, a place where spirits slip through. You move quickly, your cloak catching the breeze, and glance back at the cottage. The doorframe looks ordinary, but you know better now. You spot a neighbor sprinkling salt across her own threshold, muttering words you can't catch. For luck, she calls when she sees you staring. You nod, but you're thinking of the salt you saw in the hearth fire last night, sizzling like a secret. Is it luck? Or something older? You're drawn to a story about a local woman who forgot the rituals. She stepped on her threshold. Stone didn't hang nettles, didn't bless the door. Her bread wouldn't rise, and her child fell ill. The door let it in, your neighbor says, shaking her head. You roll your eyes. Bread dough's finicky kids get sick. But the story sticks. You joke to yourself, guess I'll start salting my apartment door. But the thought of that cursed doorstep lingers. You're starting to get why these rituals mattered. They're not just habits, they're armor. Back inside, you notice a small cloth bag hanging by the door, stuffed with herbs and something that rattles bones maybe. Your neighbor calls it a warding charm and says it's been there since her mother's time. You don't open it, but you feel its weight when you brush past like it's anchoring the house. You're handed a mug of warmed milk, the steam curling like a spell, and you sip slowly, tasting honey and something sharp. The threshold looms behind you, a silent guardian, and you realize it's not just a door. It's a pact, a promise to keep the wild at bay. You settle by the fire, her again, but your eyes keep drifting to the doorway. The wind howls, and you swear you hear a faint scratch like nails on wood. You laugh it off, probably just a branch, but you check the iron nail anyway. It's still there, solid as ever. You lean back, the milk warming your hands, and let the cottage's quiet hum pull you deeper. This threshold, these rituals, they're weaving you into a world where every step matters. You're not sure you believe it all, but you're starting to feel it. You slip out of the cottage, the night wrapping around you like a heavy cloak, and the moon hangs low, a silver coin in a sky prickled with stars. The air is crisp, scented with damp earth, and something greener, wilder. You're not just taking a stroll, you're on a mission guided by whispers of the village's herb gatherers. They say the plants you need, the ones humming with magic, only show their power under moonlight. You tug your shawl tighter, your basket bumping against your hip, and step into the meadow where shadows dance like they know something you don't. This isn't just about picking flowers. Medieval herb lore, documented in texts like the 12th century Physica by Hildegard of Bingen, shows plants were medicine, magic, and mystery all at once. You're after vervain mugwort, maybe some yarrow names that roll off the tongue like spells. Each has its purpose. Vervain for love charms, mugwort for dreams, yarrow to stop a wound's bleed. You crouch in the grass, your fingers brushing leaves that feel alive, almost ticklish. The village herb woman, her voice rough as bark, told you to pluck them at midnight when the moon's glow wakes their spirit. You glance up the light, bathing your hands, and wonder if she's right. Then there's the weird stuff, the kind that makes you stifle a laugh. She swore you have to whisper to the plants first. Thank them, or they'll curse your basket. Sorry, vervain didn't mean to yank you, you mutter half joking as you tug a stem free. The leaves rustle, and a breeze kicks up sharp and sudden. You freeze basket clutched tight and tell yourself it's just the wind. Still, you whisper a quick thanks to the next plant just in case. You're not superstitious, but you're not about to test a 700-year-old herb woman's warning. The meadow hums with life crickets, a distant owl, the soft crunch of your steps. You spot mugwort, its silvery leaves glowing like they've soaked up the moon. You remember the herb woman's tale, sleep with mugwort under your pillow, and you'll dream of the future. You smirk, thinking hope it's not a vision of my laundry pile. But you tuck some in your basket anyway, its sharp, sagey scent clinging to your fingers. You're starting to feel the pull of this ritual, the way it ties you to the earth, the sky, the stories whispered in the dark. Historians still debate whether these moonlit gatherings were practical or purely mystical. Were villagers harvesting herbs for their proven healing powers, or were they chasing magic, hoping to bend fate with a sprig of yarrow? You kneel by a patch of vervain, its tiny purple flowers trembling in the breeze, and wonder. Maybe it's both, a poultice for the body, a prayer for the soul. You dig gently, the soil, cool under your nails, and feel a strange calm like the meadows sharing its secrets. You move deeper, the village's lights fading behind you. The herb woman mentioned a quirky rule: never cut plants with iron. It scares their power away, she said, handing you a flint knife. You roll your eyes. Iron's everywhere, from hearth horseshoes to threshold nails, but you use the flint anyway. It's clumsy, scraping more than slicing, and you mutter, "This better be worth it." The blade nicks your finger, a tiny sting, and you suck on it, tasting earth and salt. You're not sure if it's the moon or the ritual, but you feel watched, like the plants are sizing you up. A story floats back to you, one the herb woman shared over a fire. A girl once picked mugwort without whispering thanks, and her dreams turned sour, nightmares of wolves and endless winters. You scoff, but you glance at your basket, half expecting the leaves to glare back. Don't get any ideas, you joke, patting the mugwort like it's a pet. The night feels heavier now, the stars sharper, and you realize these rituals aren't just about herbs. They're about respect for the land, the unknown, the things you can't quite name. You find yarrow, its feathery leaves soft as a whisper. The herb woman said it's a shield against evil, carried by soldiers and midwives alike. You pluck a sprig, imagining it tucked in a knight's armor or a mother's birthing bed. The thought grounds you, makes the meadow feel less wild. You're not alone out here, not really. Generations have walked this path, their hands stained, with the same sap their whispers carried on the same wind. You tuck the yarrow in your basket, its clean, sharp scent mixing with the mugwort's musk. The moon climbs higher, and you're almost done. You pause, breathing deep, the air cool in your lungs. The meadows alive with possibility, each plant a story, a spell, a hope. You think of the cottage, its hearth and threshold, and how this fits like pieces of a puzzle you're only starting to see. You joke to yourself, if this doesn't make me a witch, nothing will. But the words feel heavier than you meant. You shoulder your basket, the weight of the herbs grounding you, and turn back toward the village, the moon lighting your way. You're back in the cottage, the fire's glow softening the room's edges, but your eyes are drawn to the shadows, those dim corners where the light doesn't quite reach. You're not here to admire the hearth or threshold now. You're hunting for something else. Something whispered about in hushed tones, cursed objects, things tucked away in medieval homes, feared as much as they were kept. You step carefully, your boots scuffing the floor, and feel a prickle on your neck, like the house knows what you're after. You're not sure what you'll find, but the air feels thick, like it's holding secrets. Every medieval home had its share of objects believed to carry a curse, a fact noted in 14th century ecclesiastical records that warned against diabolical relics hidden in households. These weren't always obvious, no glowing skulls or haunted mirrors, but everyday things gone wrong. You spot a cracked wooden spoon by the hearth, its handle worn smooth. Your neighbor stirring a pot catches your glance and shakes her head. "Don't touch that one," she says. "It's been sour since it fell in the fire." Sour? You raise an eyebrow, but she insists it ruins every meal it touches. You step back, half expecting the spoon to twitch. Then, there's the downright bizarre, the kind of thing that makes you snort. Tucked in a basket under a bench, you find a bundle of knotted rags, tied with what looks like horsehair. Cursed that your neighbor mutters, not looking up. She says it was a gift from a spurned suitor, and ever since the house has had ill luck, spilled milk, broken stools, a hen that won't lay. You smirk, thinking maybe the hen's just lazy, but you don't touch the rags. The way they're knotted tight and deliberate gives you the creeps, like they're holding something in. You wonder who tied them and what they wanted to trap. You move deeper into the cottage, your fingers brushing the rough walls. In a corner, half hidden by a sack of barley, you spot a small clay pot, its rim chipped. Your neighbor's voice drops low. "That's from old Widow Marjorie's place. Nobody wanted it after she passed." You lean closer, the pot's dark mouth staring back. It's empty, but you swear you smell something sour, like spoiled milk. You're told it brought sickness to anyone who used it. You joke to yourself, great medieval Tupperware of doom, but you don't laugh out loud. The pot feels wrong, like it's watching you. Historians still debate whether these objects were genuinely feared or just scapegoats for bad luck. Were people blaming spoons and pots for curses, or were they grappling with a world where illness and failure needed a cause? You ponder this as you nudge the pot with your foot, just enough to shift it. A faint clink echoes inside, and you jump, heart racing. Nothing moves, but you're not touching it again. Maybe there's something to these stories after all. You turn away your gaze, landing on a frayed rope coiled by the door. Your neighbor says it's cursed too. Used to hang a thief, then brought here by mistake. "Brings strife," she whispers, and you notice how she avoids it, stepping wide like it's a snake. You're skeptical. Ropes don't curse people, but you think of the threshold stone, the hearth's iron, and how nothing here is just what it seems. You keep your distance, the rope's rough fibers glinting in the firelight, like they're daring you to test them. A story surfaces one, the village tells in low voices. A man once kept a cursed ring found in a river, and his crops failed, his wife left, his dog died. He buried the ring and the bad luck stopped. You roll your eyes. Sounds like a rough year, not a curse, But you glance at the pot, the rags, the spoon. What if you shake it off muttering, "I'd curse my Wi-Fi before a spoon"? But the thought lingers. These objects aren't just things. They're stories, fears, warnings woven into the house. You settle by the fire, but your eyes keep drifting to the corners. You notice a small bone, maybe a chicken's, tucked above a beam. Your neighbor says it's not cursed, just a charm gone bad meant to protect, but left too long. "Forgotten things turn sour," she says, shrugging. You nod, but you're thinking of the herbs in your basket, the moonlit meadow. Everything here has a shelf life, even magic. You sip from a clay mug, the ale sharp on your tongue, and feel the cottage's pulse. Its objects, its fears, its hidden edges. The fire crackles, and you realize these cursed things aren't just relics. They're part of the house's story, like the hearth's glow or the threshold's stone. You lean back, the warmth sinking in, but you can't shake the feeling that something's watching from the shadows. You joke to yourself, "If this place is cursed, I'm billing the landlord," but you check the spoon spot anyway. It hasn't moved. You hope it stays that way. You're still in the cottage. The fire's glow a steady hum, but your attention snags on the wooden beams overhead. They're dark grain, crisscrossing the ceiling like veins. You squint, noticing faint marks carved into the wood lines, circles something that looks like a star. These aren't random scratches. They're deliberate, etched with purpose. You feel a tingle, like you've stumbled on a secret the house has been keeping. Your neighbor, kneading dough at the table, catches your gaze and nods. "Witch marks," she says, her voice low. "They guard us." You lean closer, the wood's rough scent filling your nose, and wonder what they're guarding against. These marks, found in homes across medieval Europe, were believed to protect against witches and spirits, a practice documented in 15th century English churchwardens' accounts that mention carvings in homes and barns. You trace a mark with your finger, a looping spiral that feels warm like it's alive. They're not just art. They're a shield scratched into the bones of the house. Your neighbor says they're strongest at crossing points beams, doorways, places where the world might slip through. You glance at the threshold, remembering the stone and iron nail. This place is layered with defenses, isn't it? Then there's the odd bit, the kind that makes you bite back a grin. Your neighbor swears the marks must be carved with a bone knife, not iron. "Iron's too cold," she says, her hands dusted with flour. Witches laugh at it. You chuckle, thinking, "Witches mocking my kitchen knife, rude." But you notice the marks' uneven edges, like they were scraped with something softer than metal. You're skeptical, but you're starting to see the logic irons for hearths and doors. But these marks are something else, something older. You step back, the beam looming above, like it's watching. The cottage feels smaller. Now they're the marks drawing your eye to every corner. You spot another near the hearth, a grid of lines like a net. Your neighbor says it traps spirits, keeps them from dancing in the flames. You think of the horseshoe, the nettles, and how this house is a maze of protections. You're told to never erase a witch mark. It's bad luck, maybe worse. You nod, but you're tempted to joke. "What's worse than a witch's Wi-Fi hex?" You don't say it. The marks feel too serious, their silence louder than the fire's crackle. Historians still debate whether witch marks were about faith or fear. Were they carved to ward off real witches, or were they a way to name the unexplainable crop failures, sudden deaths? You ponder this as you run your hand along the beam, the wood's grain rough under your palm. Some say the marks were just doodles, but the care in their lines, the way they're hidden, yet precise, tells you otherwise. They're a language, one you don't speak but can feel. You move to the window, where another mark, a cross, sits above the sill. Your neighbor says it's for the wind, to keep it from carrying curses inside. You glance outside, the night thick with shadows, and feel a draft, sharp and sudden. You step away, the marks, stark lines lingering in your mind. You're starting to get why these carvings mattered. In a world where the dark holds teeth, a scratch in the wood is a shout. Not here, not us. A story drifts up, one the village tells when the fire burns low. A house without marks let a witch in disguised as a peddler. The family's milk soured, their sleep turned to nightmares. They carved marks after, and the trouble stopped. You roll your eyes. Sounds like a bad house guest, not a witch. But you glance at the spiral above. What if you shake it off, muttering, "I'd carve no solicitor's sign first." But the story clings like the scent of wood smoke in your hair. You settle by the hearth, the beams overhead a silent guard. You notice a mark you missed, a daisy wheel, its petals radiating like a sun. Your neighbor says it's for joy to balance the fear. You smile, liking the idea of a house that hopes as much as it defends. You sip warm ale, the mug's clay cool in your hands, and feel the cottage's rhythm. Its marks, its secrets, its stubborn fight against the unknown. The fire pops, and you realize these witch marks aren't just scratches. They're the house's voice speaking to the night, to the things that creep in the dark. You lean back, the warmth sinking into your bones, but your eyes keep drifting to the beams. You joke to yourself, if I carve a mark, I'm adding a smiley face. But you don't touch the wood. You're not sure you dare. You're sitting by the cottage hearth. The fire's glow, weaving shadows across the walls, when a soft rustle pulls your gaze to the corner. Their eyes glinting like twin embers, a black cat stretches its claws, flexing against the straw-strewn floor. You smile, thinking it's just a pet, but your neighbor mending a cloak gives you a sharp look. "That's no ordinary beast," she says, her needle pausing. "That's a familiar." Your heart skips, not from fear, but from the thrill of the word familiar. A creature tied to magic, to witches. You lean closer, the cat's purr, a low hum, and wonder what secrets it carries. In medieval Europe, familiars were animals believed to serve witches, a belief recorded in 16th century trial documents, like those from the English witch hunts, where cats, dogs, even toads were accused of aiding sorcery. You watch the cat slink toward the fire, its movements liquid, deliberate. Your neighbor says it's called Tib, and it knows things where lost coins hide when storms are coming. You raise an eyebrow, but Tib's stare feels heavier than a cat's should, like it's sizing you up. You're not sure if you're amused or unnerved. Then there's the quirky stuff, the kind that makes you choke back a laugh. Your neighbor swears Tib must be fed a drop of milk from a wooden spoon, not the cursed one, mind you, every night, or it'll turn sour. Sour like what, grumpy, you joke to yourself, but you notice a saucer by the hearth, its edges stained with cream. You're tempted to test the theory, but Tib yawns, showing needle-sharp teeth, and you decide to let it be. Feeding a magical cat feels like signing a contract you didn't read. You shift on your stool, the straw creaking, and scan the room for other animals. A scruffy dog naps by the door. It snores, soft as a bellows. Another familiar, you ask, half teasing. Your neighbor shakes her head. Just a dog. Familiars choose you. You glance at Tib, now grooming a paw with eerie precision, and wonder what it means to be chosen. The air smells of smoke and wool, but there's something else, a faint musk like the cat's carrying the wild inside. You're starting to see why villagers whispered about these creatures. Historians still debate whether familiars were real companions or just scapegoats for fear. Were they magical allies, or did lonely villagers project power onto their pets during hard times? You ponder this as Tib leaps onto a beam, landing without a sound, its eyes locked on you. Maybe it's both a cat, but also a story, a way to explain the unexplainable. You think of the witch marks, the threshold stone, another layer of this house's strange logic. You hear a story, one the village tells when the wind howls. A widow's familiar, a toad, warned her of a fire by hopping to the door. She escaped, but the toad vanished. Loyal, they are, your neighbor says, her voice soft. You scoff. Loyal toads sound like a stretch, but Tib's gaze hasn't wavered, and you feel a chill. You mutter, if my cat's a familiar, it's only loyal to the fridge, but the joke feels flat. This cottage, this cat, it's stirring something in you. You notice Tib's shadow on the wall, larger than it should be, its edges flickering like flames. Your neighbor says, familiars walk between worlds, carrying messages from spirits. You're skeptical, but you think of the moonlit herbs, the cursed pot. Nothing here is just what it seems. You reach for your mug, the ale's warmth steadying you, and catch Tib watching the fire like it sees something you don't. You're tempted to stare too, but you don't. Not yet. Outside, a dog barks sharp and sudden, and Tib's ears twitch. Your neighbor mutters a charm under her breath, too quick to catch. Keeps it bound, she says when you ask. Bound to what? You don't press, but you're thinking of the knotted rags, the iron nail. This house is a web of rituals, and Tib's at its center, a quiet guardian or a silent threat. You joke to yourself, if Tib's running this show, I need a raise. But you don't move closer. Respect feels safer. You lean back, the fire's heat sinking into your bones. Tib curls up by the hearth, but its eyes stay open, glinting like coins. You realize familiars aren't just animals. They're the house's pulse, tying the mundane to the mystic. You sip your ale, the cottage's hum wrapping around you, and feel the weight of Tib's stare. You're not sure you believe in familiars, but you're starting to understand why others did. And you're definitely not touching that saucer. You're gathered in the cottage, the fire's glow casting a warm circle around you, and a handful of villagers, their faces softened by the flicker of flames. The air hums with anticipation, not for stories or songs, but for something riskier. Divination games, rituals to peek into the future. You're handed a smooth river stone cool in your palm, and a neighbor with a crooked smile says, ask it what's coming, but don't be greedy. You roll the stone between your fingers, its weight grounding you, and feel a mix of excitement and unease. The room smells of smoke and ale, but there's a sharper edge, like the night itself is leaning in to listen. Divination was common in medieval homes, with practices like scrying or casting lots noted in 13th century pastoral manuals that warned against pagan fortune-telling. You're not scrying flames tonight. Too intense, someone mutters, but playing a simpler game, dropping the stone into a clay bowl filled with water. The ripples, they say, will show your fate. You lean over the bowl, its surface glinting like a dark mirror, and drop the stone. The water swirls, and the villagers murmur, pointing at the patterns. A journey, one says. You squint, seeing only ripples, but you nod. Who doesn't want a good trip? Then there's the weird stuff, the kind that makes you stifle a giggle. Before you drop the stone, you had to spit on it for clarity, they claim. You grimaced, but did it wiping your mouth as the villagers nodded approval. Spit's honest, a woman says, her braids swinging. You mutter to yourself, honest, it's gross, but you're starting to get the rhythm of these rituals. Spit in the fire. Spit on the stone, everything here demands a piece of you. You glance at the bowl, the ripples fading, and wonder what else you're giving up. The villagers pass around other tools, a knotted cord, a handful of dried beans, a polished bone. Each has its method, its meaning. You try the cord, looping it into shapes as a man with a scarred hand guides you. "Knots for love," he says, winking. You fumble the cord, blushing, and joke, "Hope it's not knotting me to my taxes." The room laughs, but their eyes stay sharp, watching the cord's twists like it's spilling secrets. You're not sure you believe it, but the act, tying, untying, feels like it's pulling something loose in you. Historians still debate whether divination games were playful or profound. Were villagers just passing time? Or were they seeking control in a world where famine and plague loomed? You ponder this as you toss a bean into the bowl, watching it bob. Maybe it's both a game to laugh over a spell to hope with. You think of the witch marks the familiar cat Tib. Everything in this cottage blurs the line between fun and fate. You're starting to feel that blur, the way the stone's weight lingers in your hand. A story surfaces one the villagers share between sips of ale. A girl once used a bone to divine her marriage, saw a man's face in the water, and wed him a year later. But the bone cracked, and he died young. Ask, gentle, the scarred man warns, his voice low. You nod, but you're skeptical. Bones break, men die. Still, you handle the bone carefully, its smooth surface cool as moonlight. You mutter, "If I see my boss's face, I'm quitting," but the joke feels thin. The bowl's water stays still, and you're almost relieved. You notice a woman in the corner, muttering over a handful of ash. She scatters it on the table, reading the clumps like clouds. "Weather's turning," she says, and the others nod as if ash speaks clearer than the sky. You're tempted to roll your eyes, but you think of the moonlit herbs picked with whispered thanks. These games aren't just games, they're a language, a way to wrestle with the unknown. You try the ash yourself, sprinkling it and squinting at the patterns. "Looks like lunch," you say, grinning. The villagers chuckle, but their eyes linger on the ash, searching. The fire pops, and you realize these divination games are the cottage's heartbeat, tying you to the villagers the night the questions no one can answer. You pass the stone to a girl with wide eyes, her hands trembling as she whispers her question. You don't hear it, but you feel its weight. You sip your ale, the mug's warmth steadying you, and watch the bowl's ripples dance. You're not sure you see the future, but you're starting to understand why they try. The future's a shadow, and these games are their light. You're back by the cottage hearth. The fire's glow, a steady pulse, but your hands are busy now, weaving a small charm from straw and thread under the watchful eye of a village woman with calloused fingers. The air smells of smoke and dried lavender, and there's a tension in the room, like you're not just crafting a trinket, but arming yourself. For the evil eye, she says, her voice a low rasp, as she shows you how to knot the thread in a crisscross pattern. You fumble the straw, its sharp ends pricking your skin, and feel the weight of her words. The evil eye, someone's jealous glare, sharp as a blade that can curdle your luck or sicken your soul. The belief in the evil eye was widespread in medieval Europe, with protective charms mentioned in 14th century household inventories across England and France. You're making a talisman, one to wear or hang to deflect those malicious gazes. The woman hands you a bead blue as a summer sky and says to thread it at the center. Blue fights the eye best, she insists. You nod, sliding the bead onto the thread, its cool weight grounding you. You're not sure you buy the idea of a stare causing curses, but the act of weaving feels like a shield steadying your nerves. Then there's the strange stuff, the kind that makes you bite back a smirk. She tells you to spit on the charm when it's done to wake it up. You blink, remembering the spit on the divination stone, the fire's sizzle. Spit's the key to everything around here. You mutter half joking, but you do it a quick dab on the straw. The woman nods satisfied, and you wonder if you're getting too comfortable with these rituals. The charm takes shape a rough star of straw and thread the blue bead glinting like an eye of its own. You hold it up, and it feels heavier than it should. You glance around, noticing other talismans, some tucked above the door, others pinned to cloaks. There's one on the woman's belt, a knotted cord with a tiny bone woven in. She says it's been with her since her mother's time, guarding against a neighbor's envy. You think of the cursed pot the witch marks everything in this cottage is a defense against something. You ask if the evil eye is common, and she shrugs. As common as gossip. You chuckle thinking, guess I need one for my coworker's side eye, but her stare says this is no laughing matter. Historians still debate whether evil eye charms were about superstition or social control. Were they shielding against curses, or were they a way to ease tensions in tight-knit villages where envy could spark feuds? You ponder this as you tie the final knot, the thread biting into your fingers. Maybe it's both a charm for peace, a ward for fear. You think of the threshold's iron nail, the familiar cat Tib's glinting eyes, layers of protection, all woven together like your talisman straw. You hear a story, one whispered when the fire burns low. A man ignored the evil eye, refused a charm, and his crops withered while his neighbors thrived. Envy did it, the woman says, her fingers brushing her own talisman. You roll your eyes. Sounds like bad soil, not a curse, but you clutch your charm tighter. What if you shake it off muttering, I'd blame the weather app first? But the story lingers like the bead's blue glow in your palm. You hang the charm above the hearth where it sways gently, catching the firelight. The woman says to keep it close, especially at markets where eyes wander and tongues sharpen. You nod, feeling the cottage's rhythm, its defenses, its secrets. You notice a child in the corner, weaving her own charm, her small hands clumsy but determined. For my goat, she says, grinning. You smile back, but you're thinking of the knotted rags, the cursed spoon. Even the kids here know the world's got edges. The fire crackles, and you realize these talismans aren't just straw and thread. They're the cottage's armor, a way to face the unseen without flinching. You sip your ale, the mug's warmth steadying you, and feel the charm's presence above like a quiet guard. You're not sure you believe in the evil eye, but you're starting to understand why they did. You lean back, the straw star swaying, and let the cottage's hum pull you deeper. You're safe for now. You're outside the cottage now, the night air cool against your skin, carrying the scent of damp grass and something sweeter, like wildflowers gone to seed. The village sleeps, but you're wide awake, following a narrow path to a copse of gnarled trees where fireflies wink like tiny lanterns. Your neighbor, her shawl pulled tight, walks beside you, her voice a whisper as she speaks of fairy bargains, pacts made with the good folk who linger in places like this, neither kind nor cruel, but always tricky. You clutch a small loaf of bread you're offering and feel a shiver, not from the cold, but from the weight of what you're about to do. Fairy lore was woven into medieval life with tales of bargains recorded in 13th century chronicles, like those of Gerald of Wales, who described offerings left to appease spirits of the land. You're here to leave the bread at the base of an ancient oak, its roots sprawling like fingers. Your neighbor says it's for favor. Good harvests, safe births, but you must never ask directly, or the fairies take more than they give. You kneel the earth soft under your knees and place the loaf carefully, its crust still warm. The fireflies pulse, and you swear the tree's shadow shifts. Then there's the odd bit, the kind that makes you raise an eyebrow. Your neighbor insists you turn your cloak inside out before approaching the tree. Confuses them. She says her own cloak reversed the lining flapping. You smirk thinking, what fairies can't handle fashion? But you flip your cloak anyway, the fabric awkward against your shoulders. You're not sure why it matters. But the path feels heavier now, the air thicker, like you're being watched. You glance at the oak, its branches creaking, and decide not to test the rules. The copse is alive with small sounds. Crickets, a rustling leaf, a distant owl. You notice a ring of mushrooms near the tree, their caps pale as moonlight. Fairy ring, your neighbor whispers, steering you wide. Step inside, she says, and you might vanish or dance forever. You scoff dancing's not your thing, but you avoid the ring, your boots sinking into moss instead. You think of the evil eye charm, the witch marks. This village is a tapestry of cautions, and fairies are just another thread. You're starting to feel their pull, the way they blur the line between myth and midnight. Historians still debate whether fairy bargains were spiritual or practical. Were villagers honoring ancient spirits, or were they explaining nature's whims? Blighted crops lost children with stories. You ponder this as you step back from the oak, the bread, a small, dark shape against the roots. Maybe it's both a gift to the unknown, a hope for control. You think of Tibb's glinting eyes, the divination ripples. Everything here is a deal with the unseen. The fireflies flicker, and you wonder what they see. A story surfaces, one the village tells in hushed tones. A man left milk for the fairies, but demanded wealth in return. His coins turned to leaves, his cows dried up. Greed breaks the bargain. Your neighbor says her eyes on the oak. You nod, but you're skeptical. Sounds like a bad deal, not a curse. Still, you keep your thoughts quiet, your cloak's lining brushing your neck. You mutter, if I'm bargaining, I want better Wi-Fi. But the joke feels thin. The copse is too still, the bread too alone. You notice a faint glow near the mushrooms. Not fireflies, but something softer, like breath on glass. Your neighbor doesn't see it. She's already turning back, but you linger, heart thudding. You're told to never thank the fairies. It binds you to them. You bite your tongue, the urge to speak stronger than you expected. You think of the knotted rags, the cursed spoon of objects that hold power because people believe. Maybe fairies are the same real. Because they're feared, loved, fed. The path back feels shorter. The village's lights, a faint promise. Your neighbor hums a tune old as the hills, and you clutch your cloak. The inside-out fabric, a small rebellion against the night. You realize these bargains aren't just about bread or mushrooms. They're the village's heartbeat, a way to live with the wild. You glance back, the oak swallowed by shadows, and hope your loaf was enough. You're not sure. You believe in fairies, but you're starting to understand why they left the bread. You're back inside the cottage. The fire's glow a soft anchor, but the air feels different now, thicker, laced with the sharp tang of herbs and something metallic like blood or rust. You're seated at a worn table watching a village healer. Her hands steady as stone, grind dried leaves in a mortar. She's preparing a charm, not for fairies or curses, but for healing remedies to mend fevers, soothe pains, or break the grip of a hex. You lean closer, the pestil's rhythmic scrape pulling you in, and feel the weight of hope in her movements. This isn't just medicine. It's magic woven into the bones of this house, medieval folk. Remedies were a blend of herb lore and ritual documented in texts like the 12th century Trotula, which mixed practical cures with charms for ailments. The healer hands you a cloth to tie around a bundle of feverfew, its bitter scent stinging your nose. For headaches, she says, or to chase a curse from the blood. You knot the cloth, your fingers clumsy, and wonder how a plant can fight something as vague as a curse. She catches your doubt and smiles, her eyes sharp. Plants know more than you, she says. You nod, half smirking, but you tuck the bundle carefully into your pocket. Then there's the quirky stuff, the kind that makes you blink twice. The healer insists you sing to the herbs while they steep nothing fancy, just a hum to coax their spirit. You stifle a laugh, thinking, my playlist's not exactly magical, but you hum anyway, a low tune that feels awkward in your throat. The healer nods satisfied as she pours boiling water over the feverfew. You're not sure if it's the steam or the ritual, but the room feels warmer, like the herbs are listening. You shake your head, singing to plants, but you keep humming just in case. The table is cluttered with tools, a clay jar of honey, a knife with a bone handle, a bowl of water flecked with ash. You're told to dip your fingers in the water before touching the herbs. It's cleansed with a spoken charm. You do it, the water cool against your skin, and think of the divination bowl's ripples, the fairy bread. Everything here demands a step, a word, a gesture. You ask about a curse, and the healer points to a small pouch of nettle and salt. Bury it at a crossroad, she says. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds like a lot of work for bad vibes, but you don't argue. Her hands, scarred and sure, make you trust her. Historians still debate whether these healing charms were medicine or placebo. Were villagers curing fevers with herbs, or was belief itself the remedy soothing minds in a world of uncertainty? You ponder this as you watch the healer wrap a poultice for a child's cough, her fingers deft as she murmurs a charm. Maybe it's both feverfew for the body, words for the soul. You think of the evil eye talisman the witch marks every ritual. Here is a bridge between hope and fear. A story floats up. One the village whispers when illness lingers. A woman, hexed by a rival, grew weak until a healer burned yarrow and chanted over her bed. She woke strong as ever. The charm broke it, the healer says, her voice flat like it's fact. You scoff, sounds like a good nap, not magic, but you glance at the nettle pouch. What if you mutter, I'd burn sage for my inbox, but the joke feels hollow. The healer's eyes steady as the fire make you wonder what she's seen. You notice a small vial on the table, filled with a dark liquid elderberry, she says, for winter's grip. She adds a charm, spitting into the vial before sealing it. You grimace, remembering the spit on the charm, the stone. Spit's the village Wi-Fi, you joke to yourself, but you're starting to see its place, a mark of the body tying you to the ritual. You help her stir a pot of honey and mint its sweetness, cutting the air, and feel the cottage's pulse, its herbs, its chants, its stubborn fight against pain. The fire crackles, and you realize these healing charms aren't just remedies. They're the village's strength, a way to face sickness and fear with something tangible. You sip your ale, the mug's warmth steadying you, and watch the healer work her hands a quiet dance. You're not sure you believe in hexes, but you're starting to understand why they sang to the herbs. You lean back, the feverfew bundle heavy in your pocket, and let the cottage's hum carry you forward. You're standing in a golden field, the late summer sun warming your face as you squint at rows of barley swaying like a slow dance. The village hums behind you, but out here, it's just you, the stalks, and a breeze carrying the earthy scent of harvest. Your neighbor, a wiry man with dirt-stained hands, kneels nearby, inspecting the grain with a frown. Signs are off, he mutters, pointing to a patch where the stalks lean wrong against the wind. You crouch beside him, curious, and learn you're not just checking crops. You're reading harvest omens, signs that predict the village's fate. The air feels heavy, like the fields holding its breath. Medieval farmers relied on omens to forecast harvests, a practice noted in 14th century agricultural texts like The Husbandry of Walter of Henley, which mixed practical advice with superstition. You run your fingers over a barley stalk. Its tip brittle, and your neighbor says a crooked row means a lean winter. You nod, feeling the weight of his words. Lean winters mean hungry bellies. He points to a cluster of stalks tied with red thread, a charm to bind the yield. You're told to never cut the thread or the harvest sours. You step carefully, the field a map of hopes and warnings. Then there's the odd stuff, the kind that makes you hide a grin. Your neighbor swears you must scatter salt on the field's edge at dawn to please the spirits. You raise an eyebrow. Salt again. Like the threshold, the healer's pouch. What are spirits on a low-sodium diet? You joke to yourself, but you watch him sprinkle a handful, his face serious as stone. The salt glints in the sun, and you wonder if it's less about spirits and more about claiming the land, marking it as theirs. Still, you don't touch the salt. The field feels alive watching. You move deeper. Noticing signs, you'd have missed a crow perched on a lone stalk, a circle of flattened grass. Your neighbor says the crow's a warning trouble's coming. Maybe blight? The grass fairies danced, he grumbles, kicking dirt over it. You smirk, thinking of the fairy bread, but you don't step in the circle. You think of Tib's glinting eyes. The divination ripples, everything here carries meaning. You ask about the crow, and he shrugs. Kill it or pray? You're not killing anything, but you mutter a quick hope under your breath, just in case. Historians still debate whether harvest omens were superstition or survival. Were villagers reading nature's patterns, or were they crafting stories to ease the fear of famine? You ponder this as you trace a crooked stalk, its angle sharp against the rest. Maybe it's both a farmer's eye for detail, a prayer for mercy. You think of the evil eye charm, the healing herbs. Every ritual here is a bet against the unknown. The sun dips, painting the field red, and you feel the stakes in your bones. A story surfaces, one the village tells when the granary's empty. A farmer ignored a twisted stalk, laughed at the salt, and his crop failed, while others thrived. He mocked the signs. Your neighbor says, his voice low. You scoff, sounds like bad luck, not a curse. But you glance at the crow still perched, its eyes black as coal. What if you shake it off, muttering, I'd blame my GPS first, but the story sticks like chaff in your hair. The field's not just dirt, it's a mirror reflecting the village's fears. You notice a small stone at the field's edge, carved with a crude spiral, like the witch marks in the cottage. Your neighbor says it's for plenty to call the grain. You touch it, the stone warm from the sun, and feel a strange calm, like the field's sharing its strength. You're told to leave a handful of barley by the stone in offering. You do it, the grains slipping through your fingers, and think of the fairy oak, the healer's hum. Everything here asks for something saltbread, a song. The crow takes flight. Its wings a sharp cut against the sky, and your neighbor nods like it's answered a question. You're not sure what it means, but you feel the field's pulse, its omens, its charms, its stubborn hope. You wipe sweat from your brow, the barley's golden haze wrapping you, and realize these signs aren't just predictions. They're the village's voice speaking to the earth, the sky, the things that decide who eats and who starves. You're not sure you believe in omens, but you're starting to understand why they watch the stalks. You're back in the cottage, the fire's embers casting a faint glow. but the room feels restless, like it's holding its breath. It's late, the kind of hour where shadows seem to move on their own, and you're listening to a village elder. Her voice, a soft rasp, spin tales of ghostly visitors, spirits who linger by hearths, not to haunt, but to watch, to whisper, to unsettle. You pull your cloak tighter, the wool scratching your neck, and glance at the hearth where the flames flicker like they're answering her words. The air smells of smoke and old wood, but there's something else, a chill that doesn't come from the draft. Ghostly beliefs were common in medieval homes, with stories of spirits recorded in 15th century chronicles like those of John Merck, who described souls returning to guide or warn the living. The elder points to a corner where a stool sits empty and says it's for them, the dead who visit at night. You raise an eyebrow, but notice no one sits there, not even the kids sprawled on the floor. She says to leave a crust of bread on the hearth, for them to keep them kind. You glance at the loaf by the fire, its edge charred, and wonder if it's for ghosts or just a late snack. Then there's the strange stuff, the kind that makes you swallow a laugh. The elder insists you must sweep the floor backward toward the hearth, not the door, or you'll sweep the spirits out and anger them. Ghosts hate a messy exit, you mutter to yourself, picturing a spectral tantrum, but you notice the broom's bristles are worn from odd angles. You're tempted to test it, but the elder's eyes, sharp as flint, stop you. You think of the fairy cloak the healers hum. Everything here has its rules, and ghosts are no exception. You keep your hands still, the stool's emptiness looming. You shift on your seat, the straw creaking, and scan the room. A small iron ring hangs by the window. Another ghost ward, the elder says to bind their steps. You remember the hearth's horseshoe, the threshold's nail iron, always iron. You ask if the ghosts are dangerous, and she shrugs. Some just miss the fire. Her words stick soft but heavy, and you glance at the flames, half expecting a face. You're not scared exactly, but the cottage feels bigger now, like it's holding more than it should. Historians still debate whether ghostly tales were about faith or fear. Were villagers honoring their dead, or were they explaining creaks and shadows in a world without electric light? You ponder this as you trace a crack in the table, its grain rough under your finger. Maybe it's both, a way to keep ancestors close, a story to tame the dark. You think of the harvest omens, the evil eye charm. Every ritual here is a thread, tying the living to the unseen. The fire pops, and you flinch, heart thudding. A story surfaces, one told when the wind rattles the shutters. A man ignored the hearth's bread, mocked the empty stool, and heard footsteps nightly heavy as stone. They wanted respect, the elder says, her voice flat. You scoff, sounds like rats, not ghosts, but you glance at the stool, its wood worn smooth. What if you shake it off, muttering, I'd leave a whole bakery for peace, but the story clings like the chill in your bones. The cottage's shadows feel alive watching. You notice a faint mark by the hearth, a scratched cross, not like the witch marks, but older, fainter. The elder says it's for the ghosts to guide them home. You touch it, the stone cool, and feel a strange calm, like the house is sharing its grief. You're told to never cover the mark, or the spirits wander lost. You nod, thinking of the barley stone, the fairy ring. Everything here points to something beyond. You sip your ale, the mug's warmth, a small anchor, and listen to the elder's next tale of a child's ghost who laughed by the fire. The flames dwindle, and you realize these ghostly visitors aren't just stories. They're the cottage's memory, tying the living to the dead, the fire to the night. You lean back the stool's emptiness, a quiet weight, and let the elder's voice pull you deeper. You're not sure you believe in ghosts, but you're starting to understand why they left the bread. The hearth glows, and you hope it's enough to keep the shadows kind. You're trudging along a winding path, the village fading behind you as the scent of wet stone and moss fills the air. Dawn's light filters through twisted trees, and your boots sink into damp earth as you follow a neighbor, her basket swinging toward a sacred well, a spring bubbling from the ground, its surface catching the sky like a mirror. She says it's more than water. It's a place of blessings and curses, where wishes are made and fates are tipped. You grip a small coin, its edges worn, and feel a flutter in your chest, like you're stepping into a story that's older than the hills. Sacred wells were revered in medieval Europe, with pilgrimage sites like St. Winifred's Well in Wales documented in 12th century hagiographies as places of healing and divine favor. Your neighbor kneels by the spring, her fingers trailing the water, and tells you to offer the coin for a blessing. Health, love, anything but wealth, or the well turns bitter. You crouch the water's chill, kissing your skin, and drop the coin. It sinks glinting, and you whisper a hope for strength. The ripples spread, and you swear the air hums like the well's listening. Then there's the quirky stuff, the kind that makes you bite back a grin. Your neighbor says you must circle the well 3 times backward before offering anything. Keeps the water sweet, she insists, her shawl slipping as she demonstrates. You smirk thinking, what the well's got a choreography, but you shuffle backward, stumbling over roots, feeling foolish but oddly focused. The spring's gurgle feels louder, and you wonder if it's the ritual or just your pulse. You finish the circles dizzy and hope you didn't mess it up. The well is fringed with offerings ribbons tied to branches, a cracked cup, a braid of straw. Your neighbor says each holds a prayer left by folks who trusted the water's power. You notice a rag damp and nodded, and she explains it's for healing. Dip it in the well, tie it to a tree, and your sickness fades as the rag rots. You think of the healer's fever, the fairy bread. Everything here asks for faith, a piece of you. You touch the rag, its weave rough, and wonder who left it, what they hope to shed. Historians still debate whether sacred wells were pagan holdovers or Christian sanctuaries. Were villagers seeking miracles, or were they clinging to older spirits in a world of new saints? You ponder this as you watch the water, its surface still now reflecting your face. Maybe it's both a prayer to God, a nod to the earth. You think of the ghostly stool. The harvest omens every ritual here bridges worlds. The coin's gone, but you feel lighter, like you've traded something heavy for hope. A story surfaces, one told when the well runs low. A woman cursed the spring, spitting in it after a wish failed and her child fell ill. She returned, offered a silver ring, and the child healed. Respect the water, your neighbor says, her voice soft. You scoff, sounds like guilt, not a curse, but you glance at the spring, its depths dark. What if you mutter, I'd stick to bottled water, but the joke feels flat. The well's quiet power makes you want to whisper thanks, not spit. You notice a small stone by the spring, carved with a cross, like the hearth's ghost mark, but smoother, worn by hands. Your neighbor says it's for the well's spirit to keep it generous. You touch it. The stone cool as the water, and feel a calm like the spring's sharing its peace. You're told to never take from the well no water, no coins, or it turns against you. You nod, thinking of the fairy ring, the cursed pot. Everything here has rules, and the well's no exception. The sun climbs, and you realize this sacred well isn't just a spring. It's the village's heart, a place where hope and fear meet, where coins and rags carry dreams. You step back the path calling you home, and let the spring's murmur linger in your ears. You're not sure you believe in its blessings, but you're starting to understand why they circled backward, why they left the coin. The water glints, and you hope your wish finds its way. You're swept into the heart of the village, where dusk paints the sky in hues of amber and violet, and the air buzzes with the clamor of a festival. Torches flicker, casting wild shadows, and you weave through a crowd, your cloak brushing against neighbors who laugh, sing, and pass mugs of spiced ale. The scent of roasted apples and wood smoke fills your lungs, but this isn't just a party. It's a tapestry of rituals blending faith and superstition to mark the season's turn. You clutch a small wreath of wheat and herbs pressed into your hands by a grinning woman, and feel the village's pulse alive with magic and meaning. Festivals in medieval Europe, like Michaelmas or Lammas, were steeped in rituals with records from 13th century church accounts detailing processions and offerings that merged Christian rites with older customs. You're told the wreath is for protection, to carry through the festival and hang in your home for luck. You twirl it, the herb's sharp scent tickling your nose, and join a circle around a bonfire, its flames leaping like they're chasing the stars. A priest chants nearby, blessing the harvest, but the villagers' songs, earthy raw, feel older, like they're calling to something deeper. Then, there's the quirky stuff, the kind that makes you stifle a chuckle. Your neighbor insists you must leap over a small flame at the fire's edge to burn away ill fortune. You eye the flickering coals thinking, what like hopping my bad decisions? But you step forward, heart thudding, and jump your boots, scuffing the dirt. The crowd cheers, and you land grinning, feeling lighter, like you've shed something heavy. You're not sure if it's the fire or the laughter, but you're caught in the ritual's pull, the village's joy wrapping you tight. The festival spills across the square tables, laden with bread and cheese, children weaving ribbons around a pole, an old man tossing salt into the bonfire for clarity. You recognize the salt from the harvest field, the healer's pouch, and smile at its stubborn presence. You're handed a wooden cup, the ale inside sharp with cloves, and sip as you watch a group tie offerings to a tree cloth, strips bone, charms a braided cord. They're for the saints, they say, but you think of the sacred well's rags, the fairy oak. Everything here blurs faith and folklore, dancing as close as the villagers around the fire. Historians still debate whether festival rituals were devout or defiant. Were villagers praising God, or were they slipping pagan roots into Christian cloaks to keep old spirits close? You ponder this as you weave your wreath into the tree's branches, its rough bark grazing your fingers. Maybe it's both a hymn to heaven, a nod to the earth. You think of the ghostly stool, the divination ripples every ritual. Here is a bridge holding the village together. The fire's heat kisses your face, and you feel that bridge under your feet. A story surfaces, one told as the flames die low. A man once skipped the fire leap, scoffed at the wreath, and his home grew cold, his luck thin. He spurned the right, your neighbor says, her eyes reflecting the fire. You scoff, sounds like a rough week, not a curse, but you clutch your wreath tighter, its herbs rustling. What if you mutter, I'd jump a bonfire for better coffee, but the story lingers like smoke in your hair. The festival's not just a celebration, it's a pact, a shield against the dark. You notice a child nearby tossing a straw doll into the fire, her face solemn. For the old years, she says, and you think of the healing rag rotting to take sickness away. You toss a sprig of your wreath into the flames, watching it curl and blacken, and feel a strange release, like you're letting go of something unnamed. The crowd sings louder, their voices weaving with the priest's chant, and you join in your voice, shaky but sure. You're not just a guest here. You're part of the circle, the fire, the village's beating heart. The bonfire crackles, and you realize these festival rituals aren't just tradition. They're the village's soul, binding faith, fear, and joy into one bright night. You sip your ale, the cup's warmth grounding you, and let the songs carry you forward. You're not sure you believe in the fire's power, but you're starting to understand why they leapt, why they sang. The flames dance, and you hope the wreath's luck holds through the coming cold. You find yourself lingering at the edge of the village, where the festival's echoes fade into a gentle hush, and twilight wraps the world in a soft, violet embrace. The bonfire's glow is a distant memory now, its warmth replaced by the cool breath of evening carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and fading embers. You stand beneath an ancient yew, its branches heavy with secrets, and feel the weight of the journey you've taken through hearths and thresholds, meadows and wells, all woven with the delicate threads of superstition and folk magic. Your fingers brush the wheat wreath still tucked in your pocket, its herbs whispering faintly, and you sense the village settling like a story, ready to rest. The belief in magic, so vivid in medieval homes, began to soften by the late Middle Ages as 15th century church reforms, like those under Bishop John Carpenter, pushed for stricter Christian orthodoxy, dimming the old ways. You gaze at the horizon where the last streaks of sunlight bleed into dusk, and reflect on how these rituals, spitting into fires, circling wells, were more than quirks. They were the village's heartbeat, a way to cradle hope against the vast unknown. You walk slowly, your steps measured, as if to savor the fading magic, the air growing still like the world is listening one last time. There's a peculiar tale, almost forgotten, that surfaces now when the elders murmur, when the stars emerge. A woman, they say, wove a charm too strong, blending herbs and words forbidden, and the magic turned inward, binding her to silence. You smile faintly, the story more poetry than warning, and think of the evil eye talisman, the fairy bread. How even the strangest acts carried love, fear, a longing to belong. You pause, your breath visible in the cooling air, and wonder if you've woven your own charm, carrying these stories, these moments, like a quiet spell in your heart. Historians still ponder whether these superstitions were a rebellion against a changing world or a tender farewell to fading spirits. You let the question drift like leaves on a stream and feel the yew's shadow stretch across you, its roots deep as memory. Perhaps it was both a defiance, a devotion, a way to hold the sacred close as new dawns rose. You think back to Tibb's glinting eyes, the sacred well's ripples, the festival's fire, each a note in a song you've learned by heart, a melody of faith and wonder that lingers in your bones. You sit beneath the yew, the grass soft beneath you, and notice a single firefly. Its glow, a tiny echo of the bonfire's blaze. It dances unhurried, and you feel a gentle pull, as if the village is tucking itself in, inviting you to rest. The wreath in your pocket feels lighter, now its purpose fulfilled, and you imagine hanging it above a hearth of your own, a quiet nod to the hands that wove it, the voices that shared its meaning. You breathe deeply, the night's calm seeping into you, and let the stories settle, their edges softening like a dream. No grand gestures remain, no final charms to weave. You trace the yew's bark, its texture a map of years, and feel the village's magic fade, not with sorrow, but with grace, like a candle while burning low. The firefly winks out, and you close your eyes, the world a hush of wind and starlight. You're ready to let go, to carry this journey forward, not as a weight, but as a warmth, a glow that lingers in your quiet moments. Thank you for being with me through every emotion, every wonderful moment of this journey. It has been an adventure, and I am so grateful to have shared it with you. As we close this story, I wish you a peaceful evening, filled with dreams, filled with wonder and goodness. Rest well, you deserve it. And when you are ready for the next story, I will be here waiting to accompany you again.